This conversation's reminding me that you had said that you have some experience with 3D printing.
Mhm.
Um, can you tell me a little bit about that? I don't know actually much about 3D printers other than I think I saw one in like a sci-fi movie and he like needed a gun, so he printed out a gun and then like had it. I don't remember what movie it was, but how do they
Yeah.
work and like how real is the thing that you get at the end?
So there's a few different types of printers. So if we think about it, really a 3D printer is the idea to take a digital object and turn it into a physical object. And in manufacturing, it like on the very part of manufacturing, there's a T, and there's one called additive manufacturing and subtractive manufacturing. So subtractive manufacturing is where you're going to take a block of something and you're going to take stuff away from it, like a mill or something. So that's subtracting material away from the block. And then you have additive manufacturing. So you're going to take nothing and then you're going to add stuff to it to make more. Have you ever seen the Terminator?
Yeah, maybe that's what it was.
So you know how they
I don't
like
know.
pull the guy up out of the vat of liquid?
Yep. Yeah. It's like
So
T2,
that
right?
Yeah, and that's representative of a SLA printer. It stands for stereolithography, and it uses this pool on the bottom, and it projects an image or some form of a light source. Some use lasers, some use an image, and it projects it onto the bottom, and then it uses this plunger that goes down, and this resin hardens where the light is being projected, and it just pulls up and pulls down. And then you have some that are hot glue guns essentially on these axes that move around. So these hot glue guns go over here, spit a little bit of stuff out, spit a little bit of stuff out over here. Or you have SLS printers, which will, these are the really cool ones because China has one of these and it can print out an F-16 jet. And all it is this big box, and they use powder, and then they lay the powder flat, and then they use a laser to melt that into one layer, and then they scrape powder over it again, metal powder over it again, and they use a laser to put that and melt that together. So essentially, like in a way, like you know, how a welder is going to melt the metal and turn it into liquid, and it's going to fuse together. They're kind of doing that with a laser. So that's how that style works. And when it's all done, it will print it out, and the accuracy is really like how accurate is your laser movement. So like a lot of these, the application from it has been around since the 80s, but it wasn't until about 15 or 20 years ago that the patents on it expired. So everything is just real life, like everything nowadays, like everybody has them, they're everywhere, they're in the lore and stuff as well too. So the technology price is driving down, but it's really cool in a lot of different senses as well too because like people are, I'm seeing concrete houses people are printing, like you're seeing it transition into vending machines, like people print pizzas out for people on vending machines. um, you name it, it's
Really?
really just, yeah, it's really what the technology is doing is saying I have to move something in 3D space and I have to dispense a certain amount of something at a highly accurate amount. So anytime that you can do something like that, right? Like I'm going to build a pizza, I need to take sauce and move things around and dispense highly accurate amounts of something. So really the backbone for that technology can be used for it really anything like that. Like you could take a 3D printer and very easily modify it into like a home bartending machine.
Okay.
If that
I
makes
yeah, the
sense,
way
right?
it does. I always pictured it almost like a box and you program what you want and it just like makes it.
Hmm.
But when you're talking about like a home bartender, it almost feels like an AI robot that's able to use its arms and build a drink. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah, so I mean, maybe at some point that's what it will be, but at this point, the idea is like you can move stuff around in certain amounts of space, and you have a motor that can, in this case, like it's dispensing plastic through a heated nozzle, right? And so that plastic and that heated nozzle could very easily be replaced with like a pump on a soda machine, right? So it could dispense different amounts of anything. So we look at the technology, and right now we're seeing it as, hey, this is something, and these are what people are building, and these are other projects like that as well too. But really, like the fundamental thing that's being worked on in that is I'm going to take and be able to move something around with pinpoint accuracy, right? Like in these 3D printers, these nozzles are moving around to microns of accuracy, which is less than like hair, the length of a hair. So they can move and pinpoint and put something in three-dimensional space in a really accurate spot. And then also to that filament that's being pushed through it, it's being able to dispense anything at a highly accurate amount as well too. So like I kind of see this industry and I say, yeah, there is 3D printing. We can make wrenches with it. We can do this stuff as well too. But that will also be the technology eventually that like they'll use and the math that they'll use for when you're flying a jet and you need to refuel a jet. You need to be able to move something in 3D space highly accurately and be able to dispense a certain amount highly accurately as well too. So these platforms are much bigger than I think then when we think with 3D printing, they're everything. They're the next step in technology as well too. You know, it's pretty wild. But the 3D printing stuff, right? Like we're seeing people now instead of using plastic through that head, use concrete, and because they use
Right.
concrete, yeah, they can build whatever structure as well too. So it's like you can now like 3D printing houses, and houses are going to get so much more simpler because I can program in a computer and all the cabling, right? I can program the computer to dispense cabling into the wall now too. So
That's pretty wild.
yeah, like it is just the way that things kind of move and the industries always kind of expand, you know. It's like we went through the same kind of process when people started inventing machines during the industrial revolution, and now we invented something to run those machines really, and now we're inventing parts to build those machines to run those machines. And like the farther that we move on through time and stuff like that, the less that we really got to do.
So, do you think that the technology could get advanced enough that it could build something like an organ? Because that's not using concrete or plastic. That's, I don't even know what, that's human tissue. Like, do you think it will get to
Mhm.
there? Or what
They
do you
already
think?
have that. They absolutely already have that. Yeah, I think one of the ones that one of the most famous ones that I've seen them built is a trachea, and one of the other ones that I've seen them built is something about kidneys as well too. But yeah, so they can print and they can put with these printers, they can put stem cells in highly accurately spots as well too. So I don't exactly know how they do it, but yeah, they can print physical parts for people as well too, and valves and things like that. And yeah, that's where I'd say like so it's like when we think of printing and when you bring that up, right? Like we think like the Terminator and things like that, but the practical applications is they're going to print like valves for your ears, new hearing drums for you. They're going to print bones for you. They're going to print joints for you. And like right now, the process is you go in and you have surgery done. Like they print the process and then you go have surgery done. But really, the next evolution of that is that they'll be able to print directly onto your body. Like
Yeah.
there's no need to manufacture the part. Like they'll be able to scan your body. Then they'll just be able to custom make each part specifically to you.
Um, I don't think that what I'm gonna say is that level, but when I just had shoulder surgery, I have like this
Mm-hmm.
huge scar right here,
Mm-hmm.
and they had to take a bone from down here and move it up so that my
Mm-hmm.
shoulder would stop dislocating.
Sure.
And when I went in to meet with the doctors, they let me choose between two different doctors. One of them was probably in his late 50s or early 60s, but he was like the guy that had his name on the wall, and he was like one of the founders and had been doing
Mm-hmm.
shoulder surgeries for 30 years. But he like would have to open me up pretty big because he was going to be going in there with his hands. And then
Mm-hmm.
I could also choose another guy who was like 30, and he probably only been doing shoulder surgeries for like 3 years. But he had graduated out of college, and that's all he'd been doing is shoulder surgeries the last 3 years. But he used a robot, and his robot only had to cut like a tiny little hole. and it was going
Mm-hmm.
to have the robot arms going in and then moving the bone. And the scar would have been much smaller and it was way less invasive because they explained to me that when they use a robot there's less risk of getting infections, one because it's
Mm-hmm.
not human hands going in, and two because it's a smaller hole that's being created.
Mm-hmm.
I ultimately decided to go with the older gentleman because he had 30 years of experience and I just felt like I trusted him a little bit more. But I mean, you can see how appealing the robot option was and how much he was still going to be controlling the robot. But like
Mm-hmm.
what you're talking about is almost like my body being scanned and then the machine just like prints inside my body, whereas this was him controlling it.
Mm-hmm.
Still pretty interesting, you know?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I've watched some videos on those, and when you're in med school, one of the to learn how to control those, what you have to do is you have to peel a grape.
Oh wow. Okay.
Yes, so they're very very highly accurate, but I think to some degree you can get more precision with the machine. Like experience always will win out because things that experience and you can navigate situations with experience that no matter how much like physical ability you have, experience there's no way to make that up for experience, right? Like
Right.
he's in there and nicks something or does something like those are really the issues. But if you think about it, right, like the amount of effort that I moved to move my hand this far, right? Say that took 10 units, right? Like if I put a gearing ratio here in it in some way or some form of transmission as well too, I can move 10 units highly accurately down to X amount of space or large amount of space as well too. So like when
Yeah.
you look at fine motor skills with that as well too, these machines at some point will have to outperform what the people are.
Yeah, no, I think that let's say 10 years from now, that
Mm-hmm.
same doctor is like 40 and he has 15 years of experience with the robot. It wouldn't even be a question. I mean, I would always choose him over the other guy because I'm like, I trust you have a little bit more experience and I feel like the robot is actually a better way.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it was just that the only choice for me was like him. He had like only 3 years. There was all the other doctors at the place used their hands, and I
Mm-hmm.
was fortunate enough to get to work with one of the owners or this new guy, and they were always like pushing the new guy because he didn't have a lot of clients yet. But yeah, like you said, I feel like experience does kind of trump everything. But eventually, the robot guy will have enough experience that I will say, okay, I trust you now, and I think your way is actually better. And at
Mm-hmm.
some point, we'll probably think, like, I would never let somebody go in with their bare hands because what if they slip or something? Whereas, like, we trust the machine to always be accurate, you know?
Yeah, yeah, right. Like that's really the difference is that like when we look at these things like machines, is it really just comes down to high repeatability. Like
Yeah,
a human can do anything better than a machine. A machine tends to do it better multiple times in a row.
yeah,
That tends to be. I mean, like there's obviously examples that might break that, but as a general rule, that tends to be it. And so at some point, the person will be removed from the machine too.